Chapter 2. They Call It Cardboard Crack. Did you know the 1985 Topps baseball card of former Angels outfielder Gary Pettis actually depicts his 16-year-old brother, Lynn Pettis? Ah, the excitement a baseball card dealer must feel each and every day. I thought it must be pure, unadulterated bliss. I had dreams of sleeping in the back of my own baseball card shop and waking up to the smell of 1989 Upper Deck in the morning. I would then plant my feet on the sacred ground that is behind the glass display cases. The next order of business would be for me to select a few choice packs that I could open up over breakfast while enjoying the current Beckett magazine, much like adults would read the newspaper in the morning. The rest of the day would only get better. Friends would come in and out of my shop to buy and trade cards or just chat. A baseball game would be on in the background for our enjoyment, and everyone would be drooling over all of the wax packs and singles I had for sale. There would be many conversations about baseball cards and speculation on which way the arrows would be pointing for certain cards in the next price guide. That's what my 10-year-old brain came up with as the perfect life anyway. As a child, my obsession with baseball cards added color to otherwise black and white memories. I vividly remember riding in the car with my parents when I was sick, and they stopped by a shop to pick up 3 packs of 1989 Fleer for 75 cents each. I remember seeing the house we were going to move into for the very first time one Saturday morning, but only because of the baseball cards that were in my lap. I can't tell you anything else about that day other than the full wax box of 1989 Topps and loose packs of 8 Men Out. I remember opening them at the kitchen table in front of my Uncle Jeff and loving the 1989 Topps Future Star cards. I also remember not caring much for the 8 Men Out cards with the maroon borders framing pictures of actors. Why would I care about them? Neither Gary Sheffield nor Greg Jeffries could be found in those packs. I also remember the time when I decided to plunk down $18 for a box of 1990 Fleer at a local shop. The A's game was on TV in the shop, and the Brewers were blowing them out by scoring in the double digits. The anticipation of opening the box of Fleer somehow made that atrocity better. Who knew what treasures would be in that box? David Justice or Kevin Moss, perhaps? 1991 Donruss brings back memories of a Christmas tree farm near my childhood home, and how I sat in the back seat with 5 unopened packs, marveling at the border color change between Series 1 and 2. The bullpen. I think that my desire to become a baseball card dealer can largely be blamed on my favorite place in the world, the bullpen. Or, as the owner Mike would say whenever he picked up the phone, the bullpen. It was the best baseball card shop around, and I always look forward to going there each Saturday. It was about a 10-minute drive from home, so it was just out of reach by bike, but close enough that my parents would indulge my addiction on a weekly basis. Saturday was the best day of the week for me, for this very reason. Next to Canseco, the owner Mike was my hero. The bullpen was located in a 1-story shopping strip complex. The room was longer than it was wide, and it was lined with glass cases situated in a U-shape. The glass cases artfully displayed the best cards that you could purchase. I'm sure that they sold basketball, football, and hockey cards, but they didn't matter one bit to me. For me, it was all about baseball cards. And just like many other card shops, the bullpen had shelves on the wall that displayed a plethora of wax boxes. Each had prices that were handwritten on bright poster board showing the cost of each pack and key cards that you could pull from them. While 50 cents was the going rate for most new packs at the time, there were some packs for the high rollers. 1990 Leaf for $5, 1987 Fleer for $7, and 1986 Donruss for $10. Buying packs for such high prices were what one would consider gambling. Now and then you would have someone come into the shop to throw down some money on the glass case, and open a pack for everyone to see. If they hit something big, they were the man. If not, they walked away, hanging their head in shame, often leaving the worthless pile of commons on the case. The only time I remember my dad doing this was at another shop named Baseball Greats, owned and operated by Ronnie, a church friend. Dad decided to throw down $7 on a pack of 87 Fleer and opened it in front of everyone. I remember having the distinct feeling that Mom should probably not know about this. He flipped the blue wax pack over and skillfully undid the wax flaps to reveal the cards. All eyes were on him. Could he pull a Barry Bonds? Bo Jackson? Will Clark? Kevin Mitchell? Bobby Bonilla? Jose Canseco? Each pack gave you 17 tries at one of these jackpot cards. Card by card, hope dwindled until it was a certainty that the best card in the pack was the free sticker that was included. While it's true that most people gambling this way hardly ever won, Mike, the owner at the bullpen, decided to try his luck one Saturday while we were at his shop. Cool as a cucumber, he pulled a single pack from the untouchable, to me, 1990 Leaf Series 2 box that was on a shelf that anyone could have picked up and purchased. He unwrapped the pack, quickly shuffled through the cards, and pulled out a 1990 Leaf Frank Thomas rookie card, just like a magician would have pulled a rabbit out of his hat. After showing it to everyone, he put it in the glass display case with a $5 price tag. He recommended that someone buy it now, as he predicted it would increase in value for the next 12 months consecutively. To my best recollection, it did. The Thomas ended up being one of the hottest cards of its time. After a while, I decided to pause buying new cards and asked Mike if he had any older cards from the 60s and 70s. No kids asked about these ever, but they were intriguing to me. There was just something about collecting cards of players that were before my time that interested me. For several months in a row, during my routine Saturday bullpen run, I would make the rounds by ritualistically ogling over the cards in the cases and wax boxes on the wall for about 30 minutes. When I was done, I would ask Mike to bring out the box of vintage cards to look through. Mike would disappear in the back office, a magical place with untold treasures. After returning from the back office, he would carefully place a 5-row wooden box of vintage cards on the glass case for me to thumb through. I would generally pick a few commons or semi-stars to spend my allowance on and happily make my way out to the car where my mom and or dad were waiting for me. Introducing Prodigy. Back in the early 90s, I would make trades with my friends, but that was only a network of about 5 or 10 kids. My parents signed up for an online membership called Prodigy. This was back in 1990 and was well before the mainstream internet had made its way into houses all over the world. Actually, I wasn't aware of too many houses that even had computers back then at all. For all I knew, everyone might have, but they just weren't important to kids and had absolutely nothing to do with our day-to-day lives as they do now. Prodigy was a new way of connecting with people all over the world and was life-changing for me. It helped me to connect with others right from the comfort of home, but more importantly, it opened up a whole new world of collecting and dealing. As a 10-year-old eager to make some deals, I remember sitting in the kitchen and firing up the old monochrome monitor, waiting to be welcomed by a command prompt. I would tap away and open up Prodigy. When connecting, you would hear the familiar buzzing, popping, and zinging sounds of the modem. The username and password would be input, and in a couple of minutes, I was connected with people from all over the world. A world filled with people of all ages, shapes, sizes, and races conversing back and forth with each other. It didn't matter how old anyone was, what they looked like, or how they sounded. It was a vibrant, buzzing world that was completely anonymous, without the use of graphics. I was mesmerized by the orange glow of the text that appeared on the screen. It would list topic after topic of people I didn't know who had cards for trade. To me, this was as addictive as Nintendo was, if not more. It wasn't just about cards, though. It was about dealing with other people. Since Prodigy did not allow any form of sales, we would speak in code. If someone had a 1987 Topps Will Clark that they wanted to sell for $3, they would say it was for trade for 3 GWRCS. That was code for $3, and it stood for 3 George Washington rookie cards. Eventually, I started making several deals a day and had so many things going on at one time, I had to keep notes. An olive green hinged metal box would serve as my Rolodex, and in it were index cards of various colors, each with valuable information. One side of each index card would have the name and address of the customer I was dealing with, and the other side would have complete details of the transaction. This would include the date of the deal, what the deal was, and the date of the money and/or cards received. At the beginning of each day, there would be a line of packages ready to go in the mail on our ledge, and at the end of the day, a pile of packages addressed to me would come in. Each mail day felt like Christmas. Generally, these deals would go off without a hitch, but every now and then there would be a swindler that would take advantage of the serious flaws in pre-internet mail trading. Perhaps the one that hurt the most for me back then was when I struck a deal with someone for my complete set of 1982 Donruss. I loved that set. But I loved the 1953 Topps Satchel Paige and worn Spawn that was offered to me even more. I sent out the 1982 Donruss set without any worries or concerns that something would go wrong. The 1953 Topps cards finally came in, and something immediately fell off with them. They had a glossy finish and were the same size as today's standard size cards, not the size of the 1953 Topps cards. I was duped with a couple of reprints from the 1991 Topps Archive series. As time went on, I was told of an impending doom. Prodigy would start limiting everyone to 30 free emails a month, and after that, you would have to pay 25 cents per email. I knew that this would mean the end of the line for my little business, as I would routinely burn through 30 emails within a few days. Small town business. When we moved to Kansas, not only did we not have Prodigy, we had no computer at all. I had to figure out a way to stay in the hobby that I loved so much and was making me more money than my little car wash business did in California. At 12 years old, it was during this time that my passion for baseball card collecting spread like wildfire across the little town of Robinson. In the short time that I lived there, I made converts of almost every school-aged boy in town. In doing so, I racked up about $400 cash from selling to them during the summer, which was a fortune to me. It was also a much more desirable way to make money than the way the older boy across the street took by mowing lawns. He was known as the junior entrepreneur of the town and had built up quite the client base. I hold fast to the fact that I'd rather make $20 selling baseball cards than mowing someone's lawn. 1992 Fleer Ultra has always smelled better to me than freshly cut grass. While I didn't have any online access, I did have magazines that I could use to purchase cards through mail order. During my time in Kansas, I saved up my money to purchase a 1958 Topps All-Star Mickey Mantle, a 1960 Topps Stan Musial, and a 1961 Topps MVP Mickey Mantle. The 61 Mantle was severely off-center, but I loved it anyway. I found these cards for sale in a price list from a magazine, mailed off a check, and in several weeks, I got my first big money vintage cards ever. They probably cost me $250 in total. I had to push a lot of 1992 Topps to make that kind of scratch. It's laughable to think that this is how card purchases through the mail happened back then. Nowadays, you could purchase a card from California on Monday, have it arrive Wednesday morning, and sell it to someone in Japan by lunch. One day, my parents decided we were going to go to a bookstore in the mall. As I was there, I found a book called Mr. Mint's Insider Guide to Investing in Baseball Cards and Collectibles. I loved that book so much and read it more than any other book I had ever read before. This fired me up even further to get into dealing baseball cards and buying vintage. One thing my parents had me listen to previously was Zig Ziglar's goals, setting them and achieving them on schedule. At 12 years old, I used the techniques learned from this taped lecture to save up enough money to purchase 25 T206 tobacco cards from a Kit Young catalog. It was an absolute dream to have them, but several years later, I ended up selling them very cheaply on eBay to have money for a Christmas present for my fiance, who's now my wife. Even though I missed those T206 cards, I'd say it was a worthwhile investment. Your friendly neighborhood cardboard crack dealer. In almost every television show that has to do with school, there's a character who sells drugs to kids in private. In 7th grade, I was that dealer. The drug? Baseball cards, or what a dealer friend of mine named Dwayne called them, cardboard crack. Before school, I would run to the gas station and buy up as many packs of cards as I could afford, then stuff them in my trapper keeper and backpack. I would haul my precious cargo from class to class and would be flagged down by kids itching for a Stadium Club high. During the lunch hour, I would have a line of kids at my table with their lunch money in hand to buy packs that I had for sale. I was responsible for all the disruptive stomach growls throughout the rest of the afternoon because the boys liked wax packs more than they liked lunch. I always sold out and had plenty of money to reinvest into wax packs to sell for the next day, plus a few extra packs for me to enjoy for free. As fate would have it, one of my junior high customers named Jonathan recognized me at a baseball card show about 20 years later and ended up becoming my son's youth pastor. Junk wax for vintage. The next year, I met an older guy who was of driving age. Nick was very tall. He would wear a large jacket and had his ear pierced. Aside from that, he seemed very clean cut, so the ensemble threw me off. It seemed as though Nick was from a different planet, but cardboard has a tendency of uniting people from all walks of life. He told me he had a friend with a bunch of older cards from the 50s and 60s and would be willing to trade for several of the complete sets that I had amassed over the years. When Nick told me to come over, we both loaded up many of my complete sets and went to his townhouse. Waiting for us was his friend Greg, who I would classify as a man. He made mention that he was engaged to be married and had man stubble. A 5 o'clock shadow was prevalent. It felt a bit strange, almost like a setup. I had people try to rip me off before, so I was on high alert. They outnumbered me and were considerably older. But thanks to practically memorizing the Beckett price guide each month, I was well versed in card values, so I was not worried. My past experience with reprints also kept me alert. We laid my complete sets out on the bed in Nick's room. 1988 Donruss, 1988 Fleer, 1989 Topps, 1990 Fleer, 1990 Score, 1991 Donruss, and others. They would all be considered nowadays as junk wax sets. With my complete sets laid out, Greg couldn't hide the huge smile on his face. With his gaze fixed on my cards, he handed me his box of old cards. All of them were in card savers, and all of them were from the 50s and 60s, just like Nick had told me. As I looked through them, I had a smile I couldn't hide either. I shuffled through them and made mental notes of all I was seeing. There were several different cards from various sets, such as 1951 Topps blue and red backs, 1962 Topps, 1955 Bowman, 1963 Fleer, 1953 Topps, 1954 Bowman, 1954 Topps, and even 1952 Topps. The very thought that I was holding several cards from the set that the famed 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card came from was exhilarating, like I was holding pieces of baseball card history. They were in rough shape, but definitely real and were much more desirable to me than the complete sets that had been staring back at me from my closet for years. I ended up trading Greg all of the complete sets that I brought over for his entire box of vintage baseball cards. The overt snickering and looks Greg and Nick were giving each other the whole time was a huge tell that they thought they were pulling one over on the poor, seemingly clueless kid. I don't recall ever seeing or hearing from either one of them again, but that was the best trade I had made up to that point in my life. They gave me years of enjoyment, and I loved showing my friends cards that were several decades older than they were. They made a great conversation piece. As an adult, I sold them for significantly more than I would have ever gotten for the sets. Card show flipping. Going to baseball card shows was magical. You didn't have just one dealer, you had 50 or more. It was like an endless treasure hunt. This is where I could really sink my teeth into getting several Conseco cards that I didn't yet have. I recall reading an article in Beckett magazine on how to best scout out a show. The article gave tactical and strategic advice on how to navigate through the tables and target good deals. One of my earliest experiences was finding a table that was run by an older man and woman. They had several rows of cards and boxes that were separated by player. I quickly shuffled to the Conseco cards, and after about 20 minutes, I emerged from the cardboard with a nice pile of Conseco cards I didn't have. I was incredibly excited, and surely they would work on price with me, right? Wrong. Excuse me, ma'am? I said. I'm interested in these Conseco cards. Would you consider $9 for them? She peered at me over her glasses and into my soul as I handed her the pile. She quickly shuffled through them as if I had insulted her by merely being in her presence. The woman then sharply snorted and called to her husband. Did you hear that, Rob? This kid wants to get all of these for $9. It must have really tickled them because they laughed like a couple of villains plotting a heist. By doing this, they sent me the message loud and clear that the deal wasn't happening. I walked away with my tail between my legs and on to the next dealer. They must have really wanted that extra $4. Things weren't always like this, though. I learned how to adapt and how to handle the various personalities I would encounter from table to table. One of my favorite things to do at a card show would be to purchase cards from one dealer and sell them for a profit to another dealer a few tables down. The first time I did this was with a few vintage cards. I was with my dad, and he stood by as a silent observer. I showed him what I had bought, a few 1952 Topps baseball cards, and a few minutes later I sold them to another dealer for a quick $25 profit. Doing this at an early age helped me learn how to deal with people, as I'd have to face rejection and ridicule 10 times before getting to that sweet, sweet yes. One of my last memories of dealing cards as a kid had to have been as a 13-year-old. I posted up an ad in the newspaper stating I had wax boxes for sale. A much older man responded and said he was interested. I asked my parents if it would be okay to meet this man at Jack in the Box, and they agreed, as long as they could sit a few tables down to supervise. I felt like a big shot doing a historic deal like they do in the movies. I dressed the part by putting on my best turtleneck, this was the 90s, remember, and met the man with my wax boxes in my arms. I was able to sell a lot of the cards to him that day, and I walked out of the restaurant feeling like a big-time dealer. Then reality hit me that I was still just a kid, as I was told to hop in the back seat of my parents' car so we could go home and I could finish up my homework. End of an era. Like most kids that grew up collecting in the late 80s or early 90s, I slowly drifted away from the hobby that I loved so much. I started devoting time to friends, girls, cars, and church youth group activities. As time went on, the memories I had locked up in my cards made it harder and harder for me to continue selling. So I gave up on dealing and kept my treasures stored away in my closet, rarely even to be thought of over the next several years.